Good evening and welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Bongi Wazwana, standing in for Clement Manyatela. Coming up on the show this evening, it's been a year since the Government of National Unity was established, and we look at what it has achieved. Senior Research Fellow at the Trade Collective, Dr. Pheko, and Dr. Mondi, Senior Lecturer at Wits University, join us for that discussion. Youth leaders from the ANC, DA, IFP and EFF reflect on the state of South Africa 49 years since the Soweto uprising. Higher Education Minister Dr. Nobuhle Nkabane has finally released the names of the panel that helped her decide on the SETA board appointments. Higher Education Portfolio Committee Chair Debo Kholitsi and Kamakwini Mavovana, spokesperson for the minister, join us for that discussion. But first, my comment. Now, a year ago, the Government of National Unity was formed. For some, this ushered in a new era in South African politics. Well, there were some skeptics. Guided by a statement of intent, it seemed parties understood the mandate.
The Government of National Unity is here to stay. We recommit ourselves to the Government of National Unity, and we are going to work to implement the statement of intent and everything that is set out in there. And that includes improving our economy, growing our economy, creating jobs, making sure that there continues to be rule of law, increasing the capacity and improving the capacity of the state, and addressing the issues of poverty and inequality. Now, there is unity of purpose, unity of commitment when it comes to that.
With the right government interventions, the right policies, and using the right levers of the economy, we can move this economy from a stagnant, job-shedding economy into an economy that's creating opportunity and jobs for the youth. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about what the DA has been doing in national government as well to help stimulate economic growth and jobs. But we've got to do a lot more, and we've got to do it a lot faster. The first quarter of GDP growth this year was not good enough. We need the economy growing at 3 to 6% if we're going to absorb people into work.
And we all know the cracks started showing very soon. Parties are starting to speak in different voices on key matters. No surprise, because on the campaign trail, there were some glaring differences in some of the most important issues. So, a year on, the stability of the Government of National Unity is still under scrutiny.
Unity has become a serious question in this Government of National Unity. The second thing is, it has undoubtedly been clear over time that this is a grand coalition between the DA and the ANC. As a matter of fact, if you pause to apply your mind to what it is that any other party has been contributing into this GNU, you do have to think quite hard, because all the space around which this GNU operates tends to revolve around those two parties.
But it's not just the unity of the Government of National Unity that's been under the microscope, also the size of its cabinet, 32 cabinet ministers with 43 deputies. And is it a case of bigger and better, or should it have been leaner and more effective? In the past, the performance agreements of different ministers were made public, but not this time.
We have a new government with 70% support of Parliament, and not one of the new ministers and their plethora of deputy ministers have signed a performance agreement. Now, one thing I do know, you can't manage if you can't measure. So we have a president who's running a cabinet that cannot be measured, therefore he cannot manage it. And we know that management isn't his longest and strongest suit.
In his address to the nation last year, right when he announced the Government of National Unity, President Cyril Ramaphosa said, and I quote, "These men and women we have appointed to the executive are drawn from all corners of our country." Have they served all the corners of the country, though? What are some of the successes that you attribute to the government of national unity? Has service delivery improved where you are? Do share your thoughts with us by sending us a WhatsApp voice note on 078-459-1897. Remember to tell us your name, surname, and where you are sending your voice note from. And please keep it to 30 seconds. Also send us an X on at Face the Nation SA. What are your thoughts on the government of national unity? A year on. Keen to hear from you. Now, a year into the government of national unity, and of course, remember, in his address, President Cyril Ramaphosa said the collective has a responsibility to work together to serve the people of the country, and that they were drawn from all corners of South Africa. But have they served all corners of South Africa? And what are your reflections? Remember, we are asking you this question tonight to tell us your reflections of the government of national unity a year on. But let's now speak to Senior Research Fellow at Trade Collective, Dr. Lebohang Pheko, as well as Dr. Lumkile Mondi, Senior Lecturer at Wits University. Very good evening to you both, and thank you so much for your time. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Pheko. In the Reflections of Action essay today, apart from the scoring, they title, this particular tenure of the government of unity as unity in name, failure in practice. Your take a year on.
Look, it's a difficult governance structure. It is a coalition government that is trying to share power. And I think one of the biggest challenges is that it hasn't been institutionalized sufficiently. So I think it's a slightly harsh reading, but I think a very understandable one. It has maintained political stability. And remember that analysts predicted turmoil. Some people even predicted war, and others have even accused us of being in the middle of a genocide. And I think for people who are interested in things like foreign investors and markets, those have actually remained relatively stable. The rand has strengthened, give or take a few curves and dips and dives. There has been some kind of level of economic optimism, but there's no doubt that there's significant challenges. And the one challenge that I see among many is that there really isn't a coherent national project in this regard. So even though there are a couple of things, the one is that it's certainly very different to the GNU post-1994, where the ANC was a majority government and the GNU was really just an act of goodwill. It was Mandela's magnanimity, so to say. Whereas this is clearly a survival strategy, many would argue. And because of this, there has been excess, there's been inefficiency, the bloated cabinet that you alluded to. And also, but I do think would like to point to much deeper issues later on in the conversation around electoral reform, around the ways in which we enhance parliamentary oversight, and the ways in which we can avert the potential stymieing and complete stalling of basic progress as a result of internal wars within the GNU.
And Dr. Mondi, for you, what has this year been characterized by?
Thank you so much. Good evening, Dr. Pheko, and good evening, Bongiwe and the listeners. For me, it's been phenomenal in the sense that this is what the voters of South Africa wanted, but more importantly also, the drafters of our constitution, making it a proportional representative constitution, was an ideal that South Africans should work together to find solution to our deep-rooted problems. So as far as determining its performance, I think it's too short for anyone to come to any conclusion. What I can say is that the ANC has really continued as though it's a government that's been appointed by majority. I'm saying that because if you look at the impasse in relation to the budget, they thought they could do business the way they used to do it when they were in the majority, clearly indicating to us that they've not come to reality, firstly, about the wishes of our constitutional drafters, but secondly, the voters that voted in the last election on the 9th of May, that we wanted our country to function. The 30 years of ANC have been disastrous, failing for the infrastructure, weak governance, failing institutions, and more importantly, the grey listing, which in fact, in the short time that this Commemorate has been, we've seen an improvement. We saw in the past few days, last week, that we are going to be out very soon out of the grey list. But more importantly also, as Dr. Pheko has said, that our currency has held on, we've accessed the internal market. And therefore, if we get a government that's accountable, that can do the wishes of the voters of the 20th of May by deploying capital at the right areas, fix Transnet, make sure that ESCOM continues to build capacity, that slowly things are going to change. But it is too early to call. The hardship still continues. And therefore, I think let's support it. Let's make sure that the ANC and other parties work together, because as voters, that's what people want.
So, Dr. Mondi, I'm going to stay with what you're saying, right? Because just earlier on, Dr. Pheko spoke about the issue of coherence. And this is one of those that has come into sharp focus again in the past year. For example, when you look at the Democratic Alliance, one of the parties that is within the government of national unity is actually critiquing the DA, and that is the Good Party, saying, for the first time, this is Brett Heron from the Good Party writing, for the first time, the official opposition, most notably the Democratic Alliance, has found itself not across the aisle, but at the table. The real work lies not in merely critiquing policies, but in shaping, implementing and owning them. I know you speak about the ANC, but what do you say about also the posture of the Democratic Alliance within the government of national unity?
Unfortunately, the DA was sold a dummy. I think many of us who voted on the 29th of May wanted the ANC and the DA to work together very, very closely. And hence, going with the MKP or going with the AFF was not an option for Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC. However, the DA, I think, was misled. They thought that being in bed with the ANC, they'll have joint control of different levers of our government, and therefore, as partners, push through an agenda. But the INC outsmarted them by broadening the alliance, bringing other smaller parties, and therefore, in that process, pushing the DA and making the DA a party that's a party to something that's a poison chalice.
My apologies. I'm trying to get through to somebody.
Has behaved the same way as it did. And therefore, by doing so, it means that the DA cannot effect any economic policy change. Therefore, the trajectory that we've seen the past 8 years, because of the ANC and other parties being able to push through as they tried in the budget, will continue. So that's the problem with the DA, is that unfortunately, they found themselves that they can only function in the ministries that they're controlling. But they cannot change the economic policy, because the ANC simply brings in other smaller parties to push its own agenda.
And when you look at it, right, and we'll bring Dr. Pheko back in just a moment, but when you look at this, Dr. Mondi, because we are finding ourselves as a country with still an issue around slow economic growth. The economy is not growing at the rate at which we all expected it to. You think about the fact that we still have quite a significant number of South African youth who are unemployed, and those who have decided to stop even looking for work. So is there a clear path by this government of national unity as to how do they begin to grow this economy and actually get more young people into jobs, or even as entrepreneurs?
Well, that's a structural issue, which I think the DA thought they could, in terms of economic policy, try and influence the ANC to think more like them in terms of allowing more private sector participation, which I think the president gets it. That, given that for the past 30 years, the ANC had a blank check to do as it wishes and has been dismal, that in partnership with the DA will bring in some oomph in resolving some of the problems, whether it's the systems of sciences to make sure that innovation and digitalization is embedded in our society, whether it's infrastructure issues. That ability to do that and bring in private sector players, the DA thought it could do it, but it couldn't do it. So what we have is that the ANC policies continue to go through, and we're all keeping our finger crossed that at least somewhere or somewhere there's going to be a realization that actually it's not working as we thought it would, as voters, we need to think strategically about how can we force these parties to really work in the interest of South Africa. Because if you see it, Bongiwe, even when it came to the CETA debate we're having some days ago, where ANC-linked people were appointed as chairperson in various boards of the CETAs, you could see that this ANC is behaving the same way as though it's still in power and bringing cronies into a government.
So
we need a change, we need to implement, we need to move forward. And in this case, the ANC, if it continues to have this economic influence, we're unlikely to address the issue you're talking about. Whether it's unemployment, whether it's poverty, the ANC doesn't have a plan. It talks about it, but has got no plan to do it.
Dr. Pheko, as I bring you back into this conversation, hopefully we have a better line now. Let's look at the issue of coalition politics. We used to talk about this in the context of local government in recent years and leave it there. But now at national level, we are, as a country, confronted by this. What are some of the lessons that we should be taking, especially going into the future?
So the one is formal agreements and charters, which many other countries have used. I think India is one, Kenya is another. And these are usually binding documents. And these documents are usually ratified by legislatures. They define each party's responsibilities and dispute resolution processes, which I think is incredibly important. They also provide transparency and they hold parties to account. And I think accountability is the thing that many people, many stakeholders across society would always be hungry for. Legislative oversight as well, I think, is really important. And this enables Parliament to have much more power in the midst of these sorts of arrangements. And I think we should also appreciate that the days of coalition governments are probably here to stay. I don't think that there's going to be a time when we ever see something like 2/3 majority of any party in the immediate future in South Africa. And I think that we have to really think around how South Africa's proportional vote coalitions might need to adopt different models to ensure joint programs, to deal with parliamentary questions and to ensure that these programs are adequately reported and evaluated. The other thing is fixed timetables and mandates. And I think Kenya post 2000, their GNU, for example, they actually had a time explicit a time explicit endpoint, and there was supposedly a new constitution. And I think in this instance, I would really think that we need to think around whether our own constitution, the extent to which it can be much more malleable, or at least, some other legislation malleable, porous, to show that this kind of, to illustrate and to hold space for these sorts of fixed term mandates. And also a culture of compromise, which is really the crux of the matter. So we saw, that institutional tools are extremely important. Personal ethics, personal political maturity is just not enough. And I think building the norms of inter-party cooperation, I couldn't hear Dr. Mondi very well, but I think I heard him allude to this, is incredibly important. So mechanisms like, the NEDLAG, the National Planning Commission, regular cross-party caucuses can begin to conscientize and sensitize leaders into a less adversarial form of politics. And this is where I think the crux is. And it's really unfortunate that we have this this municipal amendment bill, which really speaks to this in a very thorough and useful way. It speaks to issues around how the extent to which political parties can veto, can delay, the ways in which they can work together, the ways in which any stalling and limits on limits on trying to. For example, these factions we've seen of voting mayors in and out as though we're changing football coaches, for example. We need to begin to have a moratorium on that and ensure that there are fixed terms for these sorts of positions, especially in provinces and in this case, a country where we are bound to have malleability, porousness, people moving in and out of office. It's bad enough, I think, for the populace, for the voter, that in many respects, none of us got what we wanted per se. So everybody, if you think about a winner takes all scenario where people want their party to win, this calls for a very different approach, Bongo. It calls for a national platform of action. We saw that, for example, at the Oval House, there was this patched together coherence and cohesion. I think it could have been much stronger. But you could see there that there was no DA, there was no ANC, there was no what. It was a national program. But we cannot rely on crisis for these to bring this kind of maturity and this kind of coherence. It cannot be a win-win as in party win. It has to be a national project.
I can speak to both of you the whole night. Thank you so much for talking to us. And really, Dr. Pheko, I would like to pick your brain a bit some more in future, especially about what does parliamentary oversight look like in the context of a government of national unity. But thank you to you both for your time. That was Senior Research Fellow at Trade Collective, Dr. Lebohang Pheko, and Dr. Lumkile Mondi, Senior Lecturer at Wits University. When we come back, we have a debate with young people on their view on the state of South Africa. 49 years after the Soweto uprisings. It's been 49 years since the uprisings on the 16th of June 1976, and this is when the youth in Soweto marched in protest against the compulsory introduction of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction in their schools. Much has changed since then, but struggles for young people remain. We have invited the top 5 political parties represented in Parliament, and only the ANC, DA, IFP and EFF have confirmed. And joining me now is the ANC National Youth League spokesperson, Fasia Hassan, Federal Leader, DA Youth, and Dipiwe Olai Buntu Pheko, EFF Youth Command National Leader, and we'll also be joined by Mlungi Simabaso, the National Secretary of the IFP Youth Brigade, in just a short while. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. I'm going to start with you, Buntu, briefly. Do you think the youth of 1976 would be proud of South Africa today?
No, thank you very much. My name is Buntu. First of all, I want to greet the viewers. So, firstly, as a leader and a national leader of the EFF Youth Command, we want to send condolences to the families of the fighters who were involved in an accident yesterday when they were going back to home from the rally of the EFF that was addressed by the Commander-in-Chief, Julius Malema. We send our condolences. But also, to answer your question, the youth of 1976 is not happy, especially about this GNU government and what is happening currently in our country. Remember that the youth of 1976, they convened to fight against the Bantu education, of which it was an apartheid policies that were imposed by the apartheid government. But today we have a so-called black leaders under this GNU, of which is an ANC, IFP, and all other these black organizations, of which now they are showing the middle finger to the youth of 1976 and the people who fought against an apartheid regime. So now the issues that they were fighting for are the still issues that are still continuing even within our country. As I speak today, now the rate of unemployment is increasing under this GNU government. As students, they were promised a free education. We do not have a free education. Now, all these socio-economic issues, crime and everything is increasing under this GNU government. So the situation is very bad under the GNU government led by ANC and PE.
I'll circle back into that GNU point, Buntu. Dipiwe, let me come to you. Buntu starts off by saying that the government of national unity, in his view, has in fact, it doesn't seem to have a plan to deal with some of the issues, especially around youth unemployment. He's mentioned, of course, what he also believes are the failures of the government of national unity. Your political party is in the government of national unity. Your reflections are on?
Thank you very much, Sisibongiwe. Good evening to you and good evening to your viewers. As the DA Youth, we do recognize that South Africa faces significant challenges, particularly young people, that demand urgent attention, and the most pressing issues of staggering youth unemployment, and it was probably the highest globally, which reflect on a dire lack of economic opportunities. This is compounded by a dysfunctional education system, Sisibongiwe, which fails to equip young people with skills for the fourth industrial revolution. However, I'd would like to take this moment to note the significance of having a DA minister in the Department of Basic Education through Siviwe Gwagube is when last week she introduced and announced a number of interventions, Sisibongiwe, such as ensuring that we include entrepreneurial activities and studies into the syllabus to equip young people going forward for an ever-changing world, and also to try to deal with the mismanagement or the misalignment of skills and the economy. With a youth unemployment rate of over 34%, and rather 34% of young people not in education and training, the NEET, so which is not in education, employment and training, we need to find innovative ways, Sisibongiwe, through various of our departments that the DA is heading, like the department where Minister Leon Schreiber is, to include and try to broaden the economy to absorb young people, and also in agriculture, where we increased our exports, like in the Western Cape, where we have the most lowest unemployment rate in the country, Sisibongiwe. These initiatives that the DA ran government, like in Western Cape, like in Stellenbosch, like in Cape Town, are actually catering to ensure that we curb the youth unemployment rate via opportunity vouchers, via access to one-stop shops where young people can go and access to the internet to print their CVs without cost too much to their pockets, because we understand it's expensive for young people to go out and seek employment.
Pardon me for coming in there, because we are trying to get the IFPs Mlungisi Mabaso to join this conversation as well, because this is an important moment for all of you to reflect on the year that was of the Government of National Unity. You do have a number of people who are saying it's too soon to tell. It's been a year. Give it time and give it a moment to see then what exactly it's going to be able to do. And then you do have a party like Action SA in its scoring saying it's unity in name and failure in practice. And this is just but one of the criticisms that are laid bare by the Action SA government. But then you do have others who are saying that if you're looking at the Government of National Unity, you also need to look holistically at what it's been able to do so far, and also address the issue of coalition politics. So I'm going to come to you, Fasia. Hopefully Mlungisi has been able to join us now. So Fasia, for you, as a young person, when you look at the Government of National Unity, is it working for young people?
As you know, the ANC in the most recent election, of course, did garner the 50% mark. And as a result, we had to make a tactical decision and ultimately create what we now know as the Government of National Unity. It's not the first GNU, it may be under a different name, but it is where we find ourselves. So I think the first most important point to acknowledge is that it is not necessarily an ANC majority. And we have a very particular policy, both economic and more holistically, around what we need to do to assist young people. And core and critical to that is economic growth. One of the big things that President Ramaphosa has been trying to push through Operation Vulindlela is to open up where there are bottlenecks, create opportunities, and by not even just by government metrics, by independent metrics, that was going to change economic growth from 2 to 3%. Which meant that we are able to create a far greater amount of jobs. But the truth of the matter, Sisibongi, and we're not going to run away from it, we need to do more for young people. And it's not just about an ANC-led GNU. It's about a far more holistic approach in terms of what we're doing in various government departments. But here's the big one. We need to also be ensuring that we leverage private sector. 2/3 of the economy sits there, and we need to be creating economic opportunity and economic jobs for people, and ultimately those who want to start businesses, etc., not only in the state, but more broadly. And I think that's something that we really need to be looking at as well. So we're not going to come here and say these things are perfect, but we are going to say that we have a plan, and these are the things that we're doing, both retrospectively but also prospectively, to assist the issue.
So Mlungisi, thank you so much, and good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. We are reflecting firstly on the Government of National Unity a year on. There is a view by some that this is in fact a grand coalition, and when they speak about the Government of National Unity, they speak about the ANC and the DA, and then they call the other parties the other smaller parties. Your reflections, because your party is within the Government of National Unity a year on.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure whether I'm audible because my connectivity is poor on my side. Thank you very much. I do wish to indicate that one, the IFP is not a small party. In the GNU, and in all the other government that we are part of. You can't have a smaller party governing 27 municipalities, being part of the government in 2 provinces, being part of a government in the largest metro in the continent, which is the city of Johannesburg, and being part of the government at a national level. So we are not a small party, but while we understand that our opponents will use everything to discredit us as an organization, but we are resolute on what we exist for, and we will continue to serve the residents and the citizens of this country with dignity, diligence, and Ubuntu. But yes, of course, because I'm listening to the conversation here, the GNU is 1 year old. We really cannot expect them to do magic and fix all the things that were broken for 30 years. But the programs that have been introduced, and I think the interventions as well, they are taking us to the right direction. What the ANC needs to understand is that they've lost their majority, and they must allow other parties as well to introduce the policies that will take the country forward. So how they've been government previously have not assisted us in the country. And the reason we are there as an IFP is to make sure that we influence the decisions so that we are able to take the country forward. The reality is that the IFP was in government in KwaZulu-Natal from 1994 to 2004. And I can tell you that that's one province that had more than 6 economic hubs in the province. It was a province that had many schools, the province that had many universities. So that tells you that where the IFP is governing, we are able to deliver services, we are able to create jobs. So we are able, to enable the environment.
Can I come in there, Mlungisi?
To participate in the mainstream economy. That's why we are a province that was able to establish a state bank, which is called Itala Bank.
Mlungisi,
and those are the interventions.
I have to come in there, right?
In our policies, because we understand what needs to be done when it comes to addressing the issues that are faced by our people in this country.
All right, Mlungisi, I have to come in there because it is a debate. I have to give everybody a chance to respond. And if I may please ask that our answers be as concise as possible so everybody has a chance to speak. Bunta, I'm going to come back to you. When, you look at over time, we've seen a shift in youth engagement when it comes to, for example, political participation. There's also been a steady decline in youth participation when it comes to elections. In your assessment, why is this the case?
No, thank you very much. But also I want to state it very clear that previous quarter, it was reported that unemployment is more than 54% under this GNU. And also, what you must also know, what made young people to not participate in elections now, it's because they do not see the value in politics. Unlike our parents, if you can check, most of the people who are participating in voting are the old people who see the value, who experienced the discriminations, who experienced being ill-treated by the apartheid government. After 1994, they saw that a little change. And then the young people, especially born frees, they do not see the value in politics because everything under this government is getting worse. The rate of unemployment is worse. Crime is worse, gender-based violence is worse, our sisters are being raped left, right, and center, and the same government is failing to provide a solution. So young people, they do not see the value because of what ANC government and this current GNU government does to our people. They do not have solutions, they do not have a way to fight all these issues. But also in the EFF manifesto, all these issues are being stated very clear. How can we provide how can we create job opportunities? It's clear in the documents of the EFF that we are going to industrialize and create millions of sustainable jobs. We are going to abolishment tender so that we can give our parents, our brothers and sisters a decent job. You can see securities are being exploited. Now we want insourcing, and the EFF Youth Command and also the EFF in the institution where EFF led were able to insource securities and cleaners in VETS, UP, and in UKZN, and other municipalities where EFF involved. Securities and cleaners, they were insourced.
Yes, Buntu, hold on a second. I want us to talk about the issue of jobs, right? In just a moment, because as you speak about insourcing, as you speak about a number of issues that need to be done by different political parties or government in order to create jobs and see the economy grow, it is a point that I want all of us to discuss. But I want to speak to Fasia quickly, because you mentioned a very critical issue, Buntu, and this is an issue of gender-based violence. It's an issue of a lack of participation of young people because they do not feel that they are part of anything, given the fact that they may not have jobs. And Fasia, it is a reality. Young people, some of them are disillusioned and they simply do not want to participate in anything because they believe it doesn't change their lives. And yes, it may be a government of national unity now, but the ANC has largely been in charge for over 30 years.
Look, before I get there, maybe just to clarify, the WITS insourcing of workers actually took place when I was in the SRC, and that was under a PYA-led SRC. So it's completely disingenuous for the EFF to try and claim that. And quite ironically, I mean, the same young people that the EFF is trying to claim also didn't vote for the EFF either. But let's get into the meat and the crux of what you're asking us here. And that is ultimately that young people do not feel represented by any, frankly speaking, any political party at the moment. And that speaks to a broader issue in society about a rejection of the democratic project. And that's something that we actually really need to unpack here. So it's not only about jobs. It's about young people not feeling represented. It's about young people saying, we don't have enough people in those spaces. And that is an issue that all of the parties represented, even on the wall here today, actually suffer from. So what do we need to do? The first thing that we need to do, and next year is a local government election, we need to register as many young people as possible. If every young person under the age of 35 who is on voting age just registered to vote, we would be able to fundamentally go back to our political parties and say, if you want to win this upcoming election, the voters' roll is majority under the age of 35. Therefore, you must field candidates, ministers, deputy ministers, presidents, ultimately, of course, councillors, mayors, etc., who are also young and represent that before we even get to who we need to vote for. So nobody's running away from the fact that a lot of work needs to be done. But I think there's a more broader generational issue here. And that is, what do we as young people need to do to reclaim our power in a democratic South Africa? And that's the real critical question that we need to be answering.
Dipiwe, what kind of young person needs to be a leader to convince young people to not only register to vote, but actually go to the polls to vote? Because at times that even becomes a challenge.
Well, let me start here by saying when we look forward, the GNU's future and the future of the country as a whole hinges on its ability to deliver tangible results and maintain political stability. If the GNU succeeds in fostering economic growth, reducing unemployment, and improving education, it could solidify a multi-party governance model for South Africa, which will potentially evolve into a more permanent type of governance, which will attract young people by inspiring confidence in the delivery mechanisms. The Dear Youth itself envisions a South Africa where coalition governments reflect the diverse voices, where prioritizing accountability and opportunity, like where we do govern, where we have deployed young people. For example, in Stellenbosch municipality, having the youngest caucus, Mako caucus there, and a lot of young people within the seats of parliament and young deputy ministers. However, the GNU's fragility marked by ideological differences between political parties there and the ANC's reluctance to actually accept that they lost in the elections and stick to the statement of intent and power sharing model then hinders young people, because then it desensitizes young people from participating in the political process. And we need to be very genuine and honest, as particularly as young leaders, to say that this political organization that I'm representing, for example, the Democratic Alliance, is willing to offer XYZ, and here's a proven track record. We cannot come here and simply say we will do this, we want to do that. However, we've been in government for 30 years. Now that we find ourselves in the government of national unity, the Democratic Alliance is pushing this ANC government, is pushing the national government govern, to deliver for young people, and to create a more prosperous South Africa for all.
Just before I move to Mlungisi, quickly, on the point you're raising, Ndipiwe, there are some, though, who are saying that your party is trying to be in government and in opposition at the same time, governing through press releases and simply not being, accountable on its own over some of the policies that it takes as a collective within the government of national unity. What do you say to that?
Bongi, that's really disingenuous to be very honest. And particularly when it comes to coalition governments, myself, I've been in government for 10 years, Bongi. We understand how government works, we understand how opposition governments work. If you stick to the statement of intent and understand that the power sharing model requires dialogue and input from various political organizations around the table, there will be no need for such. But above and beyond that, Mrs. Tembi, where we do not agree with any decisions, we will advocate against those within Parliament, within our internal mechanisms. We are not part of this government to be passengers, but we're part of this government to deliver services for the people of the country.
Let me quickly go to the IFP before I give Fasia a chance to respond to this one. Mlungisi, when you look at, for example, the dropout crisis, and you look at the dropout crisis, young people not in school, it's not only the issue of unemployment, some are not even in any kind of formal training. This has been described by, the Deputy President as a moral crisis. Does the government of national unity, from your vantage point as a young person, have a clear plan to deal with this?
Thank you very much. I think it's one issue that our president touched yesterday when he was addressing our rally in Tepe. The reality is that we have the education system that is unable to respond to the economic demands. We've got what you call the National Skills Fund in the country that most young people are not aware of. We've got SETAs that we really do not know what they seek to achieve with their programs.
And whose fault is that?
So there are a lot of fragmentation in the system that we need to address.
Whose fault is that?
And part of the issues that we had raised with the president yesterday was that he needs to make sure that in their cabinet meetings, he raised these issues sharply with the ministers that are involved so that we have this coordinated approach. But also we get these offices on the ground so that they are able to respond to the demands and the issues that young people are facing on a daily basis.
If I may ask, if I may come in there, pardon me. Mlungisi, pardon me.
A program that assists.
Mlungisi, pardon me. Whose fault is it that young people don't know about SETAs, National Skills Fund and all of that? Where do you lay the blame?
These offices, they've got employees and there are ministers that are responsible. Who needs to make sure that their offices are on the ground to engage with young people. Offices of these institutions of government must be found in all corners of South Africa.
All right.
You see, you look at NYDA, there are rural areas where you can't even find the offices of NYDA. They don't know how to access NYDA. So those are the issues that are making it difficult and impossible for young people to acquire more skill, more knowledge in the country, because most of the offices are operating from the national, whereas people are on the ground, whereas people are in townships, whereas people are in the rural areas. And that's why we requested our president as the minister to make sure that he raised these issues sharply with the ministers that are involved so that they are able to take their offices to on the ground and make sure that even in deep rural areas, there are offices that are there to assist young people to acquire more skills, to acquire more knowledge, and also to have access to all the necessary services that they require.
All right, Mlungisi, I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. Buntu, I'm going to circle back to you quickly when it comes to the issue of jobs, but I want to give Fasia a chance to, in about 20 seconds, respond to the criticism, leveled against the ANC by Ndipiwe, who says that it seems that you, as the ANC, you simply aren't sticking to the statement of intent, simply not understanding that you're no longer a majority.
Well, I think that's rich because it's the ANC from the very beginning that said that we need to chart the way with a government of national unity to ensure some level of political stability. And what we must also acknowledge is that these DA ministers who've walked in yesterday have actually been building on the work that we've been doing for 30 years. Minister Leon Schreiber is claiming that the digitization of Home Affairs started with him, and that's completely false. Minister Botsaledi started all of these programs. So it's like coming in at the last minute, stealing the work of the team, and then saying it's about you. But that's not a terrible shock, to be honest. I mean, the reality here is that when there are difficult decisions and when things need to be done and leadership needs to be given, unfortunately, the DA is not there to be found. They run to the court system instead of staying at the negotiating table. It's exactly what we saw in the budget. The ANC was very, very clear. We were going to find a way to basically circumvent the VAT crisis. And that was exactly what was being done. Unfortunately, however, this tendency to run to courts instead of staying at the negotiating table when things are tough, ultimately for the better of our people, is perhaps something the DA needs to learn. And we're very happy to teach them how to do that. As the ANC and this GNU.
So, Buntu, when you look at the different challenges that young people are facing as far as looking for jobs are concerned, right? You see in some of the cases, they talk about the cost of data. You think about the fact that in some of the cases, they don't even have the money to get to places where the interviews are going to be held. In other cases, they don't even have the money for data to connect virtually. Let's speak about practically one solution that the EFF believes can actually resolve the jobs crisis in South Africa.
No, thank you very much. Firstly, I heard a part of DA saying that they are looking forward to the future of a GNU. There is no future of a GNU, especially that includes that DA and FF+, because they represent the white capital monopoly. Actually, that's why they were fighting on approving the budget, because there is no stability in that thing. These people of DA are clear that they represent anything that support white people. So there is no future there, my brother. It will collapse. Actually, it's collapsing as we speak. But also, now to give a solution in this unemployment that is increasing. As I stated at the beginning, that the ANC government have failed. The GNU government, that includes DA and the IFP, they are also failing, because all of them, they are the group of people who do not have the solutions, who do not care about the people of South Africa. The EFF, in its manifesto, stipulated very clearly that there must be a state capacity government, of which they must industrialize to create millions of sustainable jobs. As I referenced that most of the municipality, actually even in the institutions where the EFF Youth Command led SRC, they practiced that to ensure that now they are insourcing a worker, so that worker they can get a decent salary. So now our government, they do not have a solution.
So then let's move on to the ANC, especially when it comes to, I'm giving you a minute to tell us what is the one thing your party believes can resolve the jobs crisis.
There's no one thing that's going to solve the crisis, to be honest. It requires a number of different interventions. The first is about major economic drivers, agriculture, manufacturing, and even now in the green economy. We need to ensure at every single level of the supply chain, we are creating sustainable jobs, right? And that's really important. In fact, Gauteng as a province created the most net jobs in the country, not the Western Cape, the Gauteng government, which is led by the ANC. So we are looking at broad ways in which we can do it. But we're also saying, how do we support youth SMMEs, not just with funding, but with actual skills? How do we ensure that even in the installation, for example, of all these different solar panels, that young people are given the skills for all of those different elements, not just about importing it from China? And finally, there's a big focus now even on beneficiation. All of our phones and laptops and all of that we use, the batteries, we actually in South Africa have access to some of the critical minerals that are used to produce it. And now we need to be part of the group. In fact, it's already in ANC policy to actually be a part of that process of the creation of those batteries. For example, in where we need to create jobs.
Thanks, Fasea. Your minute is up. Ndipiwe, your minute.
Thank you very much. Clearly, the EFF has no solution, nothing but rhetoric. The ANC keeps on talking, no solutions. We will, yet they've been in government for the long time. The IFP, I don't know what's happening there. I promise you, and I promise delivery in terms of economic growth, it's basic service delivery. Start with proper infrastructure-led growth in local municipality to attract investment. Ensure the basics are gotten right. There's clean water. There's running reliable electricity. Our roads are maintained. Those basics will then attract investment. We then go on and ensure that we include policies that are pro-poor and pro-job creating, that don't stifle economic growth into the economy, not these fancy things of we will do and all this rhetoric of white monopoly capital that makes no sense. Tangible growth for young people to deliver services,
Your minute is
not
up,
these other bogus things.
Your minute is up. Mlungisi, 1 minute.
Well, thank you very much. It's unfortunate that because the DA only services a certain class of people in the country, but well, that's well and good. The IFP has been very clear with its policies. One, we talk about industrialization, and it's something that we're able to do in the province. Of course, KwaZulu-Natal, while we're still in government. And that we must also reserve jobs for South Africans. The National Caucus will be submitting a bill, an amendment bill, in that regard. But also we are talking about supporting small businesses so that they are able to assist in creating more job opportunities, supporting small businesses as well, for them to grow. Also looking into the issues of agriculture. If you look into what is happening in province of KwaZulu-Natal, the MEC there, she has clear programs. She's been on the ground making sure that the small farmers are supported, they are empowered so that they are able to assist.
Your minute is up, Mlungisi. Let me thank you all for your time. It is part one of our debate. Certainly, it's getting us started when it comes to the conversation. But let me thank you all for your time. And please do note that we did extend an invite to the Umkhonto weSizwe Party, but unfortunately they have not responded to be part of this conversation. So that was the ANC National Youth League spokesperson, Fasia Hassan, Federal Leader, DA Youth, Dipiwe Olai, Buntu Pheko, EFF Youth Command National Leader, and Mlungisi Mabaso, National Secretary of the IFP Youth Brigade. Thank you to you all for your time. Let me quickly take some tweets. I do understand we still have a bit of time. What are your thoughts on the government of national unity a year on? And Sahwat is saying, good evening, Tabala Mezwane. Hi, truly speaking, it seems like it's unity, but just a say they're not united. We are hoping for change, but things are hurrying up slowly, especially in local municipalities. Please come to Mopani district. You will see a dusty tar road. Okay, I might just. Voyo, good evening, Sisbongi. Hi, this has gone from bad to worse where I come from. Cater deployment has paralyzed the municipality and the people working there have no best interest for the community. I think it's time for the municipality to be put under administration. Rabutata, good evening, Bongiwa. Hi, the GNU is functioning perfectly well. It was the ANC in majority, we would be paying, if it was the ANC in majority, we would be paying 17% VAT. Collins, the status quo is still the same as before the GNU was founded. We still grapple poor service delivery, massive unemployment, potholes, power blackouts, and even social ills. The GNU is just an organogram of greedy politicians. And a reminder that these are the views of our viewers, certainly not the views of the SABC, but we are asking you for your reflections a year on of the government of national unity. Do you think things are working or not? Let's take some of your voice notes.
Season of Glory, greetings, Sisbongiwe. My thoughts on government of national unity. What a time to be alive, eh? This is so good for our country. This is so awesome. It's so wonderful because there's accountability. The biggest thing that lacked for all these previous administrations was accountability. Now, this is bringing accountability on the table because people can't just decide that we are going to do this and it goes. Sure.
Sam Aleko Dumela. GNU has silenced quite a number of vocal prominent figures in politics because honestly, you cannot buy the hand that gives you food. GNU is as good as an alliance. People from alliance make it a point that they speak one language. They needed a strong.
All right, that is Ntatesem de Aliko 3 copies. Let me thank you all for your comments this evening, and we'll see you again on Thursday. Good night.